Hi, everyone. Welcome to Untitled on Purpose with Alison Lubar. Alison Lubar teaches high school English by day and yoga by night. They are a queer, non-binary femme of color whose life work, aside from wordsmithing, has evolved into bringing mindfulness practices and sometimes even poetry to young people. Their debut chapbook, Philosophers Know Nothing About Love, is out now with 30 West. You can find out more at their website or on Twitter at the original Alison, and I'll put both of those links in the chat, as well as if you're watching on YouTube in our lovely little description box. Alison, please take it away.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be back. Really excited for this workshop. Also, school for me is starting tomorrow with the kiddos coming. So I'm like, ooh, let me do some practice teaching on adults first. Anyway, so this is a generative workshop. It's called Untitled on Purpose. My pronouns are they, she, they, them, she, etc. So let's get right into it. So a little bit about me. High school teacher, English teacher by day, yoga teacher by night. My chap is out, which Ishani mentioned, and I currently live in East Philadelphia, which is New Jersey. Still pretty great. But I would love to hear about you if you're comfortable with it. I know we're recording this session, so I'd love to know you, your name, pronouns, and your favorite anything. So for example, I would say my name is Alison Lubar. My pronouns are they, them, she, and artichokes are my favorite vegetable. I just think they're really cool. And I love that they have a heart and that you can eat the heart. Feel free to put that in the chat. If you would prefer that I not read it from the chat, then just indicate that either. But anyone else want to just put you can also just put your favorite anything in the chat. Just a little. Oh, and Darcy and I are the favorite veggie together. Yeah, they're so good. So good. There's a place near Main Point Books that has amazing fried artichokes and they're gluten-free. So Amy Beth, favorite flowers is skunk cabbage and artichoke flowers. Yeah, I feel like, have you written about skunk cabbages? Yeah, that sounds familiar. Megan, she, her, hers, long walks and broccoli. Yes, excellent, especially in combination. What a great first date, right? The broccoli. Maureen from Wisconsin. Ooh, Wisconsin. I have some friends at Madison there. Favorite green is arugula. Yeah, I love that specifically. Very like favorite green. It's interesting that in Italian the translation of it is they call it rocket, and I feel like some like British folks call it that too. Mads, she, they, summer squash is a favorite. Absolutely. Yeah, seasonal eating. And you can continue putting things in the chat. Oh, Lord, she, her, hers, favorite protein is fish. Yes, I'm a creature of the ocean. Also preference. So this is meant to be, oh, more things. Edith is here. She, her pronouns, favorite fish and grits. Absolutely. Chicken and waffles, also delicious. Levon, favorite flower, sunflowers. All of you, like, these are also some of my favorite things. To Suzanne, favorite smell, lavender. Favorite smell is cool. Yeah. Trivarna, pronoun she, her, favorite flowers are forget-me-nots, and favorite books is Richard Silkin's Sykin's Crush. I'll have to look that up. I love all these favorites. So many like familiar faces and names. So excited everyone's here. But in interest of time, let's get into it. And if you're still putting stuff in the chat, I'll still read it out. It's amazing. Just excited for participation period. All right. So workshop goals, generative. For you to walk away from here with lots of titles, lots of ideas, maybe a poem, maybe some poems, maybe some seeds of poems, and also another way to look at revision. So revision in terms of what can a title do, or how can changing a poem's title give it that kind of final, like, oh, chef's kiss, it's ready, it's done. Also educational, focus question on the purpose of title. So what can a title do with or for a work? I'm thinking about the relationship of the part to a whole. So is the title like the spoiler? Is the title the punchline? Is the title just telling you what type of poem it will be. And next is community. How can we all see the same texts in different lights, and how can we build a new bank of understanding? So part of my pedagogy is that we learn best collaboratively and we thrive best in community. And that being said, I do want to just shout out, I'll do that later. And finally, vision. So beginning of a new series. So if you find yourself coming up with all these titles that seem to be linked, maybe that's a chapbook series, bless you. Maybe that's flash fiction. Maybe that's who knows. So for you to see how this can be something to put into your writing practice. And also writing under a common title or a common theme. So in just my own brainstorming and thinking about my own writing and writing that I love, this is not exhaustive. I'm sure there's much more that can be added, and we can play around with that. If you have more to add, feel free to put that in the chat. So a title's work is to frame the poem, to give some kind of frame, to give some kind of introduction. The first thing that came to my mind was the idea of chicken or the egg. So do you write using a title first, or do you title the poem after it's written? Knowing that the title can change. Maybe the chicken decides it's a duck instead. That's great. There are also untitled poems. Not every poem has to have a title. You can have a poem Untitled 1, Untitled 2, which is also a title itself, which also adds meaning. You can have the first line as the title. We'll see an example of that. You can also choose a title from some of the words in the actual poem itself, the strongest figurative language. I'm thinking of Maggie Smith? Maggie Smith's Good Bones, or the poem Good Bones, where that idea comes in towards maybe like 2/3 away from the poem. Something that's in the last line, again, kind of like the punchline. Name the style, love sonnet or artichoke sonnet or villanelle, or I have a poem called Domestic Villanelle. You can add it to and I'm also looking over here because this is where my screen is. So just FYI. So adding it to like the pantheon of things that already exist, meditation on whatever, prayer for whoever, self-portrait, a song for whoever it is, the blank blues. I'm thinking of Auden's funeral blues, or different types of something being called the blues. Or you could title it For Something, For This Person, for all the others, for whoever you want your audience to be, even if that's not just the audience of the poem, because that way the audience or whoever is reading or listening to the poem kind of has that private look into an intimate conversation between you and whoever the poem is for. You can also build the world of the poem itself, elements of fiction. So thinking of characters. So is this about a particular character? Are you setting up a conflict, like me versus the world? And that's the title of your poem. Are you giving it a certain setting? Boston, Massachusetts, 1973. Totally up to you. So even that as something as helping to dictate or not dictate, I don't love that word, helping to reveal the world of the poem. Any questions so far? Anything coming up for anyone? And oops, oh no. Spoilers. At any point, you can put something in the chat. You can interrupt me, ask a question. Again, this is meant to be generative. It's meant to be community. It's explorative. Okay. So our first sample, this is just the title of a poem that was published by Adam Gianfrancaro. And the title is In Which a Boy Alone on a Picnic eats a rainbow cookie, but the reader doesn't know if the boy is aware there's poison in the cookie or not, because the boy isn't real and the cookie isn't real. However, the rainbow shape is real because there's an actual rainbow in the sky being set on fire by a bunch of angry fascists. So take 60 seconds or so to think about these questions. What does this title tell you about the poem already? How might it frame the poem? And what can you anticipate? So you see this as a title. You haven't even scrolled down to see the poem yet. What does this do in terms of poem world building? Looks out of Fall Out Boy song. Absolutely. Yeah. So it seems like really lyrical in that way. It's really there's a lot of like clear, like emotional, like stuff happening, some like political stuff as well. I love that. Love that you. I mean, there's a lot there, right? There's a lot. Going along with the lyrical quality, like a ballad almost. Yeah. So it almost sounds like it's gearing up to be like episodic, like what's happening, what's real. It's about story. Absolutely. Love that. Like a prologue setting the stage. Yeah. The two households both alike in dignity in fair Verona, etc. Yeah. Feels like the poem itself. Love that, Edith. Yes. So here's just a one thing that's possible, and we will see the rest of the poem, I promise. But this is a cool way to think about, can the title be standalone? Can your title be a couplet? Can your title, what elements of poetry can you have in your title? As well, aside from obviously like things like diction. Yeah. Any other thoughts before we see the actual poem itself? And again, feel free to put them in the chat. I want to make sure I give you writing time though. All right, so here's the poem. I'll read it to you, and then for the next couple, I'll take volunteers. I have a confession to make. I used to think a parabola was a different shape entirely, less a shape really, more a limit, an edgeless cookie cutter. Maybe it's the weight of refracted light that scares me, each of them on top of the other, the way they're there, then not there. The foreboding smell of sugar, but more primal, more pill on your tongue because you suck at swallowing. The entire world is an oven left on overnight. In the morning, I am the only figure without a shadow. Would someone like to read that a second time? And you can choose to maybe even like with the title with it. Thank you, Amy Beth.
Hold on one sec. I just want to move it to my bigger screen
Yeah.
so I can read better. Sorry.
It's great. Double screen life.
Yes.
I love that too.
In which a boy alone on a picnic eats a rainbow cookie laced with poison, but the reader doesn't know if the boy is aware there's poison in the cookie or not, because the boy isn't real and the cookie isn't real. However, the rainbow shape is real because there is an actual rainbow in the sky being set on fire by a bunch of angry fascists. I have a confession to make. I used to think a parabola was a different shape entirely. Less a shape really, more a limit, an edgeless cookie cutter. Maybe it's the weight of refracted light that scares me, each of them on top of the other, the way they're there, then not there, the foreboding smell of sugar, but more primal, more pill on your tongue because you suck at swallowing. The entire world is an oven left on overnight. In the morning, I am the only figure without a shadow.
Yes, beautiful. All right, so what's the relationship or conversation between the title and the poem? And this is a tough question. This is like heavy lit analysis. It doesn't have to be. Oh, the arc. I'd love to hear more about that, whether you want to unmute, whether you want to put it in a chat.
Well, of course, the poem starts with a confession about the parabola. Parabola is an arc, a rainbow is an arc, a story is an arc. So if this is partially a poem about story, the mistake about parabola might be also a mistake about story.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. The idea of arc as like literal and figurative, and then even like in the title, because there is an actual rainbow in the sky being set on fire by a bunch of angry fascists. So that sense of like the parabola, the rainbow, that arc kind of like disappearing or not disappearing or being destroyed, like the cookie being eaten in the way. So there's something about like destruction there that's not as that's not as literal as it is in the title, but it still has that kind of sense too. Awesome. Anyone else?
There's kind of a reduction in both, a reduction down to the things that aren't real, down to the rainbow in the title, and all these other things going on, but I'm the only figure in the poem itself.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So we have this like narrowing, this real narrowing from this like big and kind of like an overwhelming title, because there are no periods, there's no pause, there's no there's it like it keeps going on and on and on and on, and then even to that ends, like the use of punctuation in here, but then we get that period at the end. I am the only figure without a shadow. So then a figure without a shadow, and what does that mean? It brings up that idea of what's real, what's not real. But I love that idea of this reduction, and even that as a kind of arc in and of itself, in a way, really great, really great. Any other thoughts? We'll take like maybe one more. Okay. All right, so just so you know, like the pace of this, so we have two more examples, and then we'll get to writing exercises. All right, so sample number 2. The title of this poem is, Are All the Breakups in Your Poem Real? In your poems real? So consider, what does this title tell you about the poem already? How might it frame the poem, and what can you anticipate? Yeah, meta-poetic, poetry about poetry. So it's kind of like breaking, I always think of like meta poetry as breaking, is it the fourth wall? Breaking the fourth wall, maybe breaking a wall. In that there's this augmented or additional sense of like reality in that way too, right? So Trivarna says, the title serves as a kind of light and color, through which the speaker refracts himself in the poem. The idea of the weight of the light overwhelming him, for instance, it's an interaction with reflection, like mirror-like quality of the title emerging from through it somehow. So let me go back to the other poem on the screen and just like, absolutely. So I love that idea of the title as, the title's almost like a prism in that way, or the title's like a stained glass window, or the title's like, not just like rose colored glasses, but is something through which to understand the poem and then feel like that weight as well. Yeah. So what emerges from, and then it's almost like a funhouse mirror in that way, like what is real. So what is really the shape? But then in the mirror, that's the shape that's true. So it does a lot of playing with like truth and reality. So much metaphysical stuff. This is great. Like amazing, like not audience, participants today, community today. That's what I mean. Yeah. And that's really cool, thinking of a title then as that sense of a lens, or that kind of window, or those big things at the ocean or at mountains, or like the lookouts where you have to put like 2 quarters in, and like so you can see the view. But the title's free in our case. All right, let's go back to sample 2. Any thoughts about this?
It's second person, you're talking to the audience right away,
Yeah.
the reader.
So there's a use of you. So there's yeah, it is Amy's poem. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, so it's talking like to the audience, or there's some indication of who the you is already. So we already have that world of the poem set up. So who the characters, if that's a thing in poems, like might be as well. Excellent observation, Maureen. Let's see. Writer comes close to us from the beginning. Yeah, so that proximity to, and I didn't mean for all of these poems to be about questioning reality, but like we'll see. Yeah, so it's establishing that relationship early on. So the other poem, the first sample did really established a sense of like setting and conflict. And this really establishes like character in that way. Not that everything has to be thought of through those literary elements lens. I can't like shake the English teacher out of me. But thinking about writing as communication in that way, like it definitely fits. All right, ready for the big reveal? It is Amy's poem, Amy Nizuku. I'll read it and then I'll take a volunteer. Are all the breakups in your poems real? If by real you mean as real as a shark tooth stuck in your heel, the wetness of a finished lollipop stick, the surprise of a thumbtack in your purse, then yes, every last page is true, every nuance, bit, and bite. Wait, I have made them up, all of them. And when I say I am married, it means I married all of them, a whole neighborhood of past loves. Can you imagine the number of bouquets? How many slices of cake? Even now, my husband's plan a great meal for us. One chops up some parsley, one stirs a bubbling pot on the stove, one changes the baby, and one sleeps in a fat chair. One flips through the newspaper, another whistles while he shaves in the shower, and every single one of them wonders what time I am coming home. So good. So maybe instead of reading it a second time, take like 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and consider this question. What's the relationship or conversation between the title and the poem? Kind of a riff on, are all the relationships in your life real? Yeah, Maureen, absolutely. Like, is this really real? Like, did that really happen? Yep, absolutely. Amy Beth says the title is a question about the truth. Yeah, the answer is about the world of poetic truth. Ooh, two truths are told as happy prologues to the swelling act. So I'm like gearing up to teach Macbeth always. Yeah. So it's about truth. It's about, if anyone's read Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried, it's like story truth and happening truth. So, and kind of playing with those metaphysics. Yeah, truth and imaging. Yeah, imaging, imagining. So creation, or just like taking that one singular idea and running with it, as Amy's done in this. Absolutely. And the relationship between truth and imagination in that way, is that a type of truth? And also like these assumptions too, like, ooh, like there's like the title's a little judgy, right? And it's in a different voice. You can imagine like someone being asked this and then saying like, oh, like I'm gonna write a poem about this person, right? So kind of just using that to create like a personal mythology, or to reclaim something that maybe would have been meant as kind of a dig too. All right, I'm going to move on to the last sample just so we can make sure we have time for some writing. So sample number 3, I love you to the moon and. So what does this title tell you about the poem already? How might it frame the poem, and what can you anticipate? Oh yeah, let's go back real quick too. So for Trivarna said, I love how the poem challenges or rather extends the idea of what is meant to be real. I like that idea of meant to be real. It expands the reader's idea of what reality itself must accommodate, sparks an ignition of wonderment, and in its accommodation of so many alternative realities in one present, it also indicates the manyness, queerness of being. Yeah, so the idea of the like I contain multitudes, like that, the complexity of identity in that way. I love that. And I love that sense of like alternate reality, like, oh, like if we had met in a different time or in an alternate universe, or there's the like the superhero fascination with like the metaverse kind of variation. I love this as like as existing in that kind of universe too. Awesome. Thank you so much for that too. All right. So let's get to sample number 3. So I love you to the moon and. So Mad says it's the first line of the poem. Yeah. And even if you guess something and it's quote unquote like wrong, it's not really, there's not really a wrongness to it because that's another opportunity. Yeah, so Levance, Amy Beth says, plays on the reader's expectation because of the common saying. Yep, I love you to the moon and back. Like, so cute, cute. Let's get matching rings. Yeah, exactly. Levance says, you expect there to be an expansion on the title. Yeah, so especially with that ampersand, the and, like, ooh, and. So Edith says, I love those titles that continue in the poem. Definitely feels like they use the title as the first line. I think it creates momentum early that way. I love that idea of momentum. It's like the roller coaster, like starting to go up, and you're like, ooh, what's this going to be? Love that. Maureen says lowercase I and ampersand sets up questions. Yeah, so interesting things about the I uncapitalized and the tone of that, and the just like this casual ampersand. Absolutely. Any other thoughts before the big reveal? By one of my favorites, Chen Chen. So I will read it. We can read it twice. It's short. It's so short comparatively. I love you to the moon and not back. Let's not come back. Let's go by the speed of queer zest and stay up there and get ourselves a little moon cottage. So pretty. Then start a moon garden with lots of moon veggies. So healthy. I mean, I was already moonlighting as an online moonologist most weekends. So this is the immensely logical next step. Are you packing your bags yet? Don't forget your Sailor Moon jean jacket. Let's wear our Sailor Moon jean jackets while twirling in that lighter, queerer moon gravity. Let's love each other so good on the moon, on the moon. Anyone else? Read it one more time. We could spend like 3 hours on any of these poems. Thankfully, it's being recorded so you can go back and look at this, etc. Anyone else for a second reading?
Okay, I'll be the official reader.
Ah, love it, Amy Beth. Thank you.
Okay, I like to practice reading aloud.
Love it.
I love you to the moon and not back. Let's not come back. Let's go by the speed of queer zest and stay up there and get ourselves a little moon cottage. So pretty. Then start a moon garden with lots of moon veggies. So healthy. I mean, I was already moonlighting as an online moonologist most weekends. So this is the immensely logical next step. Are you packing your bags yet? Don't forget your Sailor Moon jean jacket. Let's wear our Sailor Moon jean jackets while twirling in that lighter, queerer moon gravity. Let's love each other so good on the moon. Let's love the moon on the moon.
Ah, beautiful, beautiful reading. So what's the relationship or conversation between the title and the poem? I just want this as a children's book. Can you imagine? Oh.
Well, I love you to the moon is a common phrase, fairly common phrase. And so it's turning that on its head because it's saying not back, right? And then it merges into the fantastical about living there and twirling there and growing the veggies. And yeah, so very lovely.
Yeah, so it kind of turns that sense of like, oh, I'll love you to the moon and back. It says like, yeah, that's nice, but there's a better way to be loved. Let's do this instead. And that kind of self-creation of love in that way. Maybe one more comment just for sake of time. Oh, Travarnis says, from the title, I also sense the importance of leaving certain things unfinished. Yeah, I love how that carries itself into the poem as well, of something unfinished as a way of being explorative. Absolutely. So that even with that title, it's unfinished. I love you to the moon and we're like, well, okay, so what's the and what, and back and not back. And then there is no, especially like with all of like the commas and the enjambment and the continuation of like even quote unquote like the sentences like continue into like new stanzas as well. So that idea of the continuing. Oh, so Amy Beth says, just inside reminds of Italo Calvino, Distance of the Moon. I'm not familiar with that, but I'll have to look that up. But yeah, the use of parentheses here is so cool. Like I feel like I use parentheses a lot and like brackets in my writing, but I think that even in here, like it has that kind of like that moon kind of shape, like, oh, this is contained. Ooh, this is contained. And it feels like very like together. I even was just noticing all the like the double letters, like the double O's in moon, T's in cottage, and pretty in veggies, weekends immensely. So even though that's kind of like a like the sky is just blue English teacher, right? Just noticing that sense of like the togetherness even with the consonants there. And again, like you can still like put some comments like in the chat if things are coming up for you. I do want to get writing to the writing time for you. We have about 25 minutes left, or about like 20 minutes, because I'm going to pause and stop the recording in case any of you want to share what you've written. So exercise number 1, generative. Make a list of 20 titles, just the titles, just the titles. Don't start writing the poem unless you really can't help yourself. So a couple ways to start generating these. What do you want to read about? You consider a stem, like a prayer, an ode, a meditation. You can set a scene, set up a character, announce a conflict. You can ask a question. If you're stuck, write about your favorite anything, like an ode to artichokes. Great, I'd love to read it. Going to take 10 minutes for that. I'll set a timer. We have about 30 seconds left. All right, that's time. So now optional share, or if you don't want to share like the titles that any of the titles that you came up with, what came up for you during this? Like, what did you notice? Did you notice any things in common? Did you know? That was perfect. All right. So for those of you just on the internet, we just did optional share and what came up for you. So we're next in conversation. So choose a few of the titles you generated and then consider connections among them. Is there a series of odes or songs? Are there any thematic similarities? Like we had someone in the chat mention something about that. Any questions and answer? Are there main titles or subtitles? Are there parts? Do any of the titles feel like they could fit within any of the other titles that you have? We're going to just take 5 minutes for this. And if you're inspired, you're ready. If you're like, I don't really want to do like titles first, like you can go ahead and start like filling in the poem to any of those as well. Oh, so Amy Beth says Kazim Ali has a book with memoir and poetry. Oh, I love that. I love that. I have so much reading I want to do. I'm bad at it. I'm a bad reader. All right, let's do 4 minutes just to make sure that we get to the next part. All right, timer starting now. I have about 20 seconds left. So just find a good pausing point. And then I do want to get to the last writing exercise just to give you an extra like minute or two, then we can stop recording and do a little bit of sharing if you want. So the next writing exercise, so given time, we would have optional share and or what came up for you. And that's also just as a note, you can always consider like what came up for you during that process is something else that can help really finesse your writing process or as a place to explore too. And the third is revision and retitling. So choose a draft or an untitled poem and consider, how do you want to frame it? What or who is it a response to? What's the strongest image, the strongest figurative language? What do you want to kind of tease? And does it have a thesis? Does it have something it's arguing for? Or is it arguing against anyone? So take maybe 30 seconds to write down the prompt if you want to keep it, or take a screenshot, but the recording will be posted, so you'll be able to pause. And then optional share would have been recap. Titles are mutable, they're changeable. You can always, like, nothing is ever final until it's published. And even then you can revise it for the next time it's published. Consider your process and try something new. So if you always go title first, try poem first. If you always go poem first, try title first. Again, chicken or the egg, maybe it's a duck, who knows? A frame or world building. So what do you want to build in terms of the world of the poem? You determine the relationship it has with a poem, like a spoiler alert. And in the last 30 seconds, I really want to shout out Edith for being the one who suggested that I do this workshop. Who said, like, at the Sandy Crimmins event, which Edith won Sandy Crimmins, which is amazing, so amazing, phenomenal poem, but was like, oh, Alison, you should do a workshop on titles. And I was like, yes, I'll do it. Did I know what I was doing? Absolutely not. Did I do it? Yes. So here we are. So thank you so much to Edith. And then finally, thank you. If you have questions or feedback, there's my email. You can find me on Twitter. If you want more of me, that's my website that is not completely updated, but I'm going to work on that. So we can stop recording now and then share if anyone wants to.